I grew up in a literary family. And so I had literature, in my life from the earliest times. And my father was an English professor, and he taught many, many different genres. And he really loved literature and language and narrative. And I was thinking about this morning, that I was really raised on Lord of the Rings from early age. So I was fed. My mother read The Hobbit to me when I was 7, and my dad read The Lord of the Rings to me when I was 8.
Nightmares?
8 and 9. No, not from that. I had my nightmares from other things, but no. And so I was really raised on story, myth, this kind of deep sense of ancientness, magic, but mysterious, unreliable, inconsistent magic, but, power in the world. And, so that was really a big part of me. So when I came to write this book, I knew that I knew I needed to write it in I guess we might call it a not straightforward way, in the sense that, because I have an academic background, right? My default to some degree is, if I start talking about kind of bigger issues, is to get kind of intellectual and academic. And I was like, no, that's not the book I want to write. So I charged myself with the challenge of presenting multiple genres of writing in the book to reflect and represent the diversity of our actual lives. Like, our lives are not one kind of narrative. They're not one kind of song. They're not one kind of tone. We're constantly moving between different lenses, for example, through which we see the world. We step in and out of different stories that we're living inside of, whether we're in the public sphere or in the private sphere. And so that's from my view, that's actually how we live, is that we're kind of constantly moving through what you might call different genres or different aspects of consciousness. And so that's why when I was writing this, I was like, okay, how can I use different genre to help people have a little bit of that experience, and also to keep them engaged, because story is the primary way through which we make sense of our world. I mean, this is why, we always were telling stories around the fire forever, right? Is because this is how we know who we are. This is how we pass on our values. This is how we share our mistakes and how we atone, right? We do all of that through story. And it's also what we remember. Like, if you think about talks that you go to, right, and there's this person speaking, what do you remember? Like, you don't remember the 5 points that they needed to make. You remember the story that they told. And so I knew that a lot of the material I was going to offer was going to be challenging. And this is part of the Thrutopian challenge, right? Is what we're presenting to people are often things that people want to turn away from, or they're in denial about, or they'd like to engage, but it scares them and they don't quite know what to do with that, right? And so I was thinking of this as, how do I titrate my readers' experience so that they can stay engaged? And so I build in pauses, for example, like, especially if I go through something I'll have my reader is the main character of the book. And then the writer is also a character in the book, and we have conversations. So if I present something that's kind of intense, right, I'll be like, okay, that was a lot. Let's just pause for a moment. Let's take a few breaths. How you're feeling in your body. You might want to stop and make some notes about how you're feeling right now, so that we can titrate our experience. Because if we think of ourselves as being in a trauma culture, one of the principles of trauma work is that we don't go any faster than the slowest part of us can go. Because if we try to push forward, then we re-traumatize, or it's possible. Not always. It's not a guarantee, but it's possible. So being able to slow down and digest and integrate is absolutely key to healing trauma. And so that's a kind of underlying principle throughout the book, which in my view, different genres enable us to do. Because if you have a kind of intense piece about dealing with systemic racism, let's just say, since we've already talked about that today, to be able to pause, digest, write about it, think about it, and then go into a story makes it easier to actually take it in and integrate it and then work with it. So that's why there's so many different kinds of information, different ways of presenting information, and so on. And I think this is Thrutopian because form transmits meaning in a very fundamental way. This is something that, when I was, a professor and academic, I was really aware of, as a literature PhD, right, is form, is what can be expressed or not expressed by using different types of form. And so what's the genre but a form? And so with Thrutopia, I think a big part of our challenge and opportunity is how do we use form to help us digest the hard bits, face and digest the hard bits and breathe, and then be able to stay in or come back. Like you might need a break, come back in, stay in or come back, circle back. And so genre enables us to do that. And so for me as a nonfiction, not fiction writer, but as you say, there's plenty of narrative. I mean, to me, the whole book is a narrative. It's all a story. Of course. It's all a story of development and of possibility. So it was not an easy book to write, I will tell you. It was hard because of trying to make those pieces work. So you don't have a reader all of a sudden go, wait a minute, we were just talking about this and now all of a sudden we're talking about that, right? But I had fun doing it too.